Welcome back to Universal God Message of Peace in our Abrahamic dialogues. And I'm Lee Weissman, and this is Dr. Khalid Zaheer. And last week we began the topic of how to make our prayer more meaningful. And last week I talked and talked and talked. But this week I get to sit back and I get to relax and I get to hand it over to Dr. Zaheer. So, Dr. Zaheer, how do we make our prayer more meaningful?
Thank you very much. I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. One thing that makes me nervous is that I don't know, I have this eerie feeling that I've talked about it already, but never mind. This topic is so important that it could be repeated. Um, you see, when we are praying to the Almighty, the important thing is that we are focused, that we are remembering Him properly, and as a consequence, we're not getting distracted. Um, the more we are able to achieve it, the better the quality of our prayers. Um, I think whenever I talk about this subject, I just mention four important aspects of our prayer that would, if properly followed, would make our prayer meaningful. The first of them is to uh, have this understanding in mind, as has been mentioned in a statement attributed to the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, that you worship God as if you're looking at Him, because even if you can't see Him, He does see you. Uh, in other words, at the time when you are beginning your prayer in whatever manner you do it, uh, have this reality in mind that your Creator is looking at you. Uh, to be honest, this feeling should be there all the time, but it's not humanly possible. We are humans, and there's so many things that we do. We get distracted. We get attracted towards evil as well. But at the time when we are, you know, we have decided that this particular occasion is meant for only to remember and worship our Creator. It would really be a worthwhile idea, and it really helps that you tell yourself that your Creator is looking at you and He knows your intentions, your feelings. Um, that's the first thing, and I feel that although not always, uh, at least on some occasions, it does give you some kind of a sense that you are being watched. So in our case, if there are five prayers, I keep saying to myself and to others, if you are able to achieve one out of five with that kind of a spirit, I think it's a very good achievement, a very good percentage. The second thing, I just keep saying, I keep mentioning, but I do admit I've never been able to achieve that state of mind. But even if you've not achieved it yourself, it's still worthwhile an idea to share with others in the hope that some other might be able to do it. And that I can imagine if somebody is able to achieve that kind of state of mind, my goodness, the prayer is going to be the very best. That again comes from another hadith, which says that when you stand up for your prayer, try praying the prayer of somebody who is departing. In other words, imagine that this might turn out to be your very last prayer. Um, honestly, quite often we are not quite as focused in our prayers because, as is expected, as the ideal is, because we are mentally involved in one worldly matter or another. There is something that is vying, uh, to get our attention. and not allowing us to focus as best as is desirable. Somehow, if you are able to uh, get this feeling that, this might turn out to be my very last prayer. And the next big item is going to be departure and facing your creator. I can imagine, although I've never been able to experience that, but I can imagine that it would be the very best prayer you can ever say. I can sometimes see this happening to some people. I hope it happens sometimes to me as well. When sometimes, well, not very often, but on quite a number of occasions, you have people, religious people, who are sentenced to death for political reasons. I mean, there's no crime committed except for the fact that they made statements or they took action which the authorities found to be so strongly condemnable that they declare capital punishment for it because it's seen as a revolt. So normally the tradition is, I've not seen myself, but I'm told that in most societies where there is capital punishment, there is this uh, facility available to the one who is ultimately going to the gallows. Immediately before that, he or she is asked, uh, what could be your last wish? And it is said, I know that some stories go like this, that there are some pious people who said that we would like to say our prayers. So, I mean, I'm sure that such prayer, in some cases at least, would be the one that is suggested in this idea of telling yourself that this may turn out to be your last prayer. The third thing that I would mention is that, uh, we in our prayers say quite a few things. Um, and in our case, whatever Muslims say, it's normally in Arabic, although I'll come to it in the next part as well, in the next point as well. So, but I also personally believe that some part of it has to be in Arabic. Uh, so, obviously, when you're saying something to the Almighty in the prayer that you're making, uh, it's it would be a good idea, and in actual fact, I believe it's absolutely essential that you know the meanings of what you're saying, or else, how are you going to get that spirit? Uh, so, some part of the prayer that we say, as I said, is in Arabic and has to be in Arabic, uh, because that is the part from the Quran, or is so important that uh, it helps in creating uh, the right spirit. So for instance, when we are doing ruku, we incline and then we get up from ruku and stand and then go for our prostration sujud. There is an expression which is mentioned, Sami Allah liman hamida. Now, surprisingly, I asked many Muslims uh, about what the meaning is. I'm talking about obviously non-Arabs, Pakistanis, Indians. Most of them have no idea of what it is, even though they've been saying it for the last so many years, 5 times a day. Uh, that doesn't help. I mean, you're saying things you don't even know. And the wordings mean God has heard the one who has praised him. And then we say, "O our Lord, Rabbana lakal hamd." All praise is for you. I mean, it's a very small effort of trying to understand the meanings would help make this part of the prayer, uh, I think, much better in spirit. But the last point that I mentioned to my fellow Muslims is with a statement, with a disclaimer that look here, this is my honest understanding. I believe that this understanding is correct. Just listen to it. If you don't agree with it, well, just ignore it. But I can assure you that if you accept what I'm saying as valid, as allowed, and you start practicing it, I bet that your very next prayer would begin to be meaningful. It will start giving you real spirit, to a lesser or greater degree. And that is this suggestion. And this is what my understanding, honest understanding is that our prayer, the Muslim prayer, has two parts. I'm talking about what you say, your utterances. One part is what I've already mentioned is absolutely essential. And it has to be said in Arabic. Uh, that part I suggest should be understood. Unfortunately, it is not understood properly. No attempt is made actually, and I'll come to it why no attempt is made for that purpose. But no attempt is made, and the end result is that the prayer is said, and it is said without any spirit. But there is the other part where it is left to your discretion whether you pray through one prayer or another. It's absolutely the discretion of the one saying his her prayers. So there are only five parts, I believe, which are obligatory. The beginning, Surah Al-Fatiha, followed by a passage of the Quran, getting up from your ruku position, Sami Allahu liman hamida rabbana lakal hamd, saying Allahu Akbar as many times as you change your postures, and finally saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah towards the end. The rest of it is yours. Uh, I have reasons to believe why I'm saying what I'm saying is correct. And if you start agreeing with what I'm saying, goodness me, what it actually means is that the rest of your formal prayer is for you to choose and decide how to talk to your creator and what to talk to him about, and in whatever language you feel comfortable in. So, I mean, I keep saying to my fellow Muslims that, have you ever imagined that when you are prostrating, you're putting your forehead down, your forehead is there on the floor. You're so close to your creator spiritually. And you know what you're doing? You know what you're saying there? Subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, subhanallah. No idea. Just a quick repetition of a few words which carry no meanings to the person who is reciting. So instead of that, if you were to say to the Almighty, okay, no worries, keep saying Subhan Rabbil Ala if it makes you comfortable. Because obviously, uh, people, what is conventional is what makes people comfortable somehow. But quite apart from doing it, say to your Creator, "Oh God, oh Allah, I'm sorry. I'm I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not doing well. Please help me. You've given me so much, and whatever you want to say. Um, I'm sure that it's going to lift the level of your prayer in its spirituality and its ability to connect you with your Creator. Uh, and I've seen people, telling me that after we started following this particular point that you mentioned, and I not just me, I mean there are many more who mention it, but not very many, not the number that I want to be mentioning it. Uh, Somebody said that, but not one, but quite a few people, they did not want their prayer to end. They wanted it to just keep going because you start getting a feeling that you're speaking to a creator. Okay, the last two things I would mention is one point which Rabbi Wiseman mentioned, very, very correct point. Uh, there are obligatory prayers and there are then additional prayers. The number is not important. It's the quality that is important. Uh, but somehow, many people focus on uh, number, making prayers, formal prayers, more in number. And one philosophy that is mentioned is that they say that, if somehow you're not doing quite well in your obligatory prayer, then this non obligatory prayer that you're saying in good number is going to make up for it. I've never been convinced about this rationale that is presented. But the other problem, which is what would be my last point, is the you know strange uh, understanding that really has somehow overwhelmed the imagination of a large number of Muslims. Um, Something which is not untrue, something which really has not been understood. And that has really caused to hijack the real spirit of prayer. That has been the cause of it, which is the mention over and over, a repeated mention of the fact that when you say your prayers, when you do such and such thing, when you say such and such thing, you get so much of reward. Your reward gets written and it multiplies. The end result is that people are looking at the reward. They're actually looking as if they have a calculator in their hands and they are saying, okay, 4 units rakats done, multiplied by so much, and great, we've made a great achievement. And then you it just kills the spirit. It just kills it. I mean, I do believe that there is a reward. But what has happened is that what was something correct, because it was overemphasized, it really has taken away the real spirit. The idea was that if you say your prayer properly and you do it in its right spirit, you will also get reward. The reward is not your purpose, it's just an information. The Almighty is going to be pleased and is going to promise you that he's going to give you much more. But this overemphasis on reward, which I remember Rabbi Wiseman mentioned this mentality of trading. You are actually doing a transaction, is what really has killed the spirit, and is something that really uh, needs to be corrected. And I keep telling people that look here, reward is fine, but it's not the purpose. The purpose is to remember your Creator, to beg Him, to ask Him for help, to praise Him, glorify Him, thank Him, and be mentally and spiritually connected. And honestly, I mean, by connection, I mean you start getting a feeling that I'm talking to Him. And somehow, probably I mentioned the other day as well, that I, for one, feel that uh, the best feelings in prayers that I've always had come to me when I'm saying sorry to my Creator. I mean, I'm ashamed, and I'm telling him that you know I I really feel uh, regretful. But obviously, I mean, sometimes you're desperate for something, um, not just to get your sins cleansed, but you want something uh, to come from your Creator, and you pray and you get it, and it's brilliant. Uh, I don't know, and I I'm still fascinated by the thought, the example given by Rabbi Wiseman about the Hindu worship, and maybe we might talk about it more. But that was really fascinating. But I just want to um, throw another uh, call it question or a point to be discussed. Sometimes I have a feeling that the religious divides of ours, um, they become a barrier. Uh, and people who are most certainly looking for their creator, they're looking for a connection with him. When they look at the differences, they kind of hesitate. Sometimes I have a feeling that, instead of making efforts to what they call uh, proselytize, and, preach and convert, I think even if somebody says I'm an agnostic or whatever, tell him that let's pray. I mean, it's not just our creators, your creators. Try it. Give it a try. I mean, okay, you may have a feeling that he may not be there, but you can't deny the fact that there are chances that he's there. Give it a try. I don't know. I have a feeling that 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 connection itself probably is the biggest of the arguments or evidences that is there, that he's there and he is expecting us to worship him. Okay, that's all from me, but I would want a discussion to go on this subject. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Zaheer. You made some amazingly powerful points there. Some really good advice. What are your thoughts, Rabbi Wiseman? Do you have any questions for Dr. Zaheer?
Well, first of all, I want to say really amazing advice. It's amazing how well, it's amazing that all of the advice, I will say that, um, applies. I mean, there's nothing there that I can't relate to. There's nothing there that that doesn't make perfect sense to me in terms of my own experience, which is really, I, it's one of those things that I have to say, particularly when religious Jews talk to Muslims, I think it's always a little surprising to us that we can have these conversations and totally relate. Like it's kind of remarkable, the extent to which I can relate to what you're saying. The first point that you made about praying as if God, as if God is seeing you and as if you're seeing God, so to speak. That same analogy occurs in the rabbis. There's the very same one, um, and it is an extremely difficult thing to do for me. But it's also very beautiful. And the second one you mentioned, also the prayer of the person who's departing. Um, I had an experience where I was having surgery, and it was a pretty difficult surgery, and um, there was a possibility that I wouldn't come out of it, and you know, so they said, get your will in order and all of those things and whatever. And the last prayer that I had before going into surgery was probably the best prayer of my life. Right?
Wow.
I you know, and then um, afterwards, I spent a lot of time trying to recover that. Like I thought, like, okay, I got it. Like I knew what that was then in that moment, but it was very hard to get back again because I wasn't in that position, and I couldn't kind of get my brain back into that space. Um, but in that moment, it was very real. Um, what you said about the language of prayer is really very like obviously very pertinent to us. We pray in Hebrew, and so many people have absolutely no idea what they're saying. They have been saying it for years and years and years and years and years. They know all, many of them know it by heart. My own grandfather knew the entire thing by heart. It's an hour long of text, and he could just, and I'm sure he understood maybe a third of what it was that he was saying. And that can be a lot. I mean, there are a lot of people who just don't understand almost anything of what they're saying. And while and again I agree with you, like that there is a portion of the prayer which has to be in the holy language because it's quoting from the Torah and so forth, and there's traditions that it has to be. And there is also a part of the prayer that does not necessarily have to be. And um and that your advice is extremely good advice. Unfortunately, I also offer the same advice to people very often. Um, that the part that does not have to be that doesn't have to be um, in Hebrew, you should do in the language that you understand you should understand best on the themes which are most important to you, in that moment, right? Because you're living your life and you have things, right? You have things that you want to talk to the Creator about. Talk to the Creator about them, so that prayer becomes something which is real. And I it's very interesting to say about the forgiveness. I mean, I also find the same thing. Um, I don't know, maybe it's a question of personality. Maybe we have similar personalities, or it could also be that like that's a moment when you're most real, you know, when you're admitting you're wrong. It's a moment of intense vulnerability. I think people find that with their relationships too, with their spouse, that the time that you're most real with your spouse is when something has gone wrong and you have to say, I'm so sorry, I just messed up, And that becomes a moment of intimacy. And I think that the same thing is true with God, that feel a sense of we feel a special sense of intimacy when we have to admit we're wrong, and when we're in that moment of vulnerability. And um and the prayer as it is, right, if you kind of just do the set prayers, there's not enough room for that, right? I mean, sometimes there's not enough room for that. There's a little room, and even the room that we have, so in our case, so after the main prayer, right, after the main prayer, there's a kind of a space, right? The sort of space. And that space after the main prayer was kind of left open for a person to be able to pour out their heart. But the rabbis saw that people didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know what to do. So they composed prayers that you could use to kind of express yourself, to express um, for forgiveness primarily. And somebody wrote one, then somebody wrote two, then somebody wrote three. And so probably in the early times, people would pick one of them. Now everybody says all of them. So now what happens is, you pray, you say the prayer, and then you have this huge bunch of texts asking for forgiveness that you speed through in order to get through it, because you've come to the idea that you need to say all of it, right? And so that the goal is to say all of it, as opposed to uh, what it was really designed for is to speak your heart, right? And so, and I've encouraged people, if you're listening to me, when it comes to Tachanun, okay, don't say all those words, okay? Really speak to God. Really, if you want to say part of it, say part of it. Of course, please. And if you want to say all of it, if you have all that time, no problem. say it slowly, no problem, that's wonderful, but also add your own words, right? Or at least pour your own meanings into the words, but don't rush through it and don't say all those things, because the main thing is for you to talk to God. So that's my piece of advice. And lastly, when you were talking about the reward, I was running in my head how many different things I've been told the reward for, right? If you do this, then you get the reward for this. And if you do this, like I you know, I can't describe how many times I've been told if you just do this, you have, olam haba, you get heaven, right? I must have heaven like 5,000 times over again, right? So like, what am I worried about? So, it really judging from my tally, right? I should have nothing to worry about. I basically don't do anything ever again because like I've earned like a million times over. But it just does. But I also know in my heart it doesn't work that way, right? It just doesn't work that way, and I have to try to understand those statements. I think that the way I understand them in my best moments is to say, look, if you could do this one thing, right? Completely, wholly, all of you, if you did this one thing and you put every ounce of yourself into it, then you would have paradise. Why would you have paradise? Because you would be the kind of person who was able to put all of yourself into serving God, right? Which is very different from saying that it's like a slot machine, right? And that if I stick the coin into the machine, if I just do this thing, then okay, I'm going to get this reward for it. It's a very different thing, and I think it's a very dangerous mentality, you know, and to start thinking of spiritual things as kind of, you know, stuff that you accumulate, that you're accumulating merit, you're accumulating, you know, as we say in American English, brownie points, like you're getting little gold stars, and it's it's not like that. You're developing a relationship with the creator, and these things are things which can develop a relationship with the creator, but they're not going to do that, right? If it's only for the reward. If we bring the flowers, right? If we bring the flowers to the wife, right? Because we're going to get a reward for it, she's going to bake us cookies, okay? That kind of defeats the purpose, right? The our generosity, our heart, right, is in the cookies and not in the relationship with our spouse, right? And it's not supposed to be in the cookies. It's supposed to be in our relationship with our spouse. So it should also be in our relationship with God. So
That's very, very profound and resonates in me as well. Before I ask you to sum it up, Dr. Lali, I want to say one thing more about my experience with people who are saying prayers regularly, and they have somehow been convinced that what they're doing, as you rightly said, it has already made you eligible for the paradise 5,000 times. So, honestly, I'm telling you, may God save all of us from such tendencies. Such people, some of them, are committing big crimes
oh yeah.
and without impunity. Because the mentality is we've already got our paradise. And look, we are saying our prayers regularly, which is very dangerous, extremely dangerous. I mean, the act of worship that was an opportunity for you to seek forgiveness from the Almighty and do away with your sins is actually making you to do more. I mean, you're getting encouraged. That tendency, I think it happens because instead of the true spirit, you're actually being informed over and over again that it's giving you so much of reward and so much of assurance of paradise. That part is very problematic.
That's such a great point. That's such a great point. You know, if you feel like you have so much in this column, you feel like you can fill up this column. And say,
Yeah,
okay, okay, yeah, yeah, this is not good. I know it's not good, but look at all this great stuff I have here. Okay, so I've got room. You know, I've got, my pile is this
true.
high, this pile is this high, so I'm okay still. Right? That there is that. There definitely is that.
Um, you actually, I'm sorry, Dr. Dali, I have to say one thing more.
Oh, please do, please
He
do.
keep he keeps saying things which really are they motivate you to say more. In the Quran, there is this mention, and I have a different understanding about that mention. But the way it's normally understood is that on the day of judgment, there are going to be scales. The scale on the one side is going to be good deeds, on the other side is going to be bad deeds, evil deeds. So if your good deeds are going to be heavier than the bad deeds, you're successful. And obviously, in the converse case, you're going to be in hell. Now that makes the mind like a calculator. So, you have cheated, you've told lies, you have committed frauds. Okay, fine. But what about these prayers? And these people who are corrupt in their businesses and in whatever they're doing, there is a habit amongst them, a practice to go to Mecca, if not twice, once a year, do Umrah, get back cleansed, and start doing afresh. Oh my goodness. This is really a high scale, uh, you know, um, misuse of religion, and corruption is justified, and the person is absolutely fine, satisfied. And I'm telling you, it's going on at a very big scale, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think that's true. And I think it gives religion a bad name,
Yeah,
especially when people see, those who say they're Muslim or under any other, religious title that, and then they do these bad things openly. And then they see these people praying as well. So obviously that puts them off, doesn't it? And it reminds
yeah,
me of there's a verse in the Quran, and which says, "Woe to those who pray but withhold the small kindnesses." So, um, I think that we should ask ourselves, what is the purpose of prayer if it doesn't bring us to
yeah,
actually good deeds, like doing good deeds? And
yeah,
I think it does say in the Quran that please correct me if I'm wrong, but that good deeds cancel out bad deeds. So I think perhaps if people are engaged in doing wrongdoing, they want to then do good deeds to cancel out the bad deeds, which I can't really go against that. I think, we all, that's better than, not doing the good deeds. But it's important. I think it's important to remember that God is most forgiving, and it says in the Quran, God forgives all sins. So, if people do sin, we shouldn't not ask for forgiveness. And however, it does also say in the Quran that Allah forgives those who, when they commit a, sorry, my translation, I might get the words wrong, and forgive me if I'm not quoting it properly, but forgives those who, when they commit a sin out of ignorance, and then when they realize it's wrong, they ask forgiveness and God forgives them. But I think we should be actively trying to turn away from what we have come to realize is wrong and not to keep repeating it. But if people think, well, going to Umrah or going to Hajj will purify me, then I'll just keep doing what I know is wrong, and then I'll be cleansed from that sin. We don't know if we'll be alive tomorrow. So the point you made about, it being our last prayer, I think is very, very powerful, because we might not make it to Umrah or Hajj. And actually, even if we do, let's not forget that we're witnesses against ourselves. Like when we know that something is wrong, why are we keeping repeating that? If you genuinely are repentant, then what does that mean? That means to stop doing that wrong deed, because otherwise you're not actually truly repentant. In which case, I think perhaps that it applies that doing good deeds will cancel out the bad deeds. So there is still a way, just keep doing more good deeds, but praying, just praying all day, does that count as a good deed if it doesn't actually bring you to properly, what is the higher form of prayer, Dr. Zaheer? Is it to, kneel, bow, prostrate, stand, bow, prostrate, or is the higher form of prayer to spend? I mean, obviously, I personally think it's important to do both. The contact prayers are important and everything, but what is more pleasing to our Creator? Is it to actually stand in prayer before Him and bow, prostrate, or is it to go and help your neighbor? Is it to go and feed the poor? Is it to go and stand up for justice? Is it to help people? What is a
Yeah.
higher form of prayer? That's my first
I think
question. It's another point later I'll make.
they both go hand in hand, and I think they're both important. One without the other is incomplete. A very good prayer is what pleases the Almighty, and helping somebody who is in need with good intentions without causing harm to him or her, without trying to get a return reward in one form or another. That too is obviously something uh, which is which causes your spending to be nullified, to be destroyed. And that brings me to just one last point. Uh, in response to what you've said, indeed, the Quran does say that good deeds they uh, kind of do away with bad deeds. They become a reason for the bad deeds to be cleansed, to be wiped off. But the converse of it is also mentioned in the Quran. There are some bad deeds which destroy your good deeds. So one should really always be very careful. Uh, if, for instance, somebody does Umrah very regularly and says his prayers regularly, but then it so happens that he is constantly causing harm to people,
Mm.
committing fraud in businesses. I mean, there is a likelihood that these bad deeds might destroy the good deeds. That's also a possibility mentioned in the Quran. So to feel that since we are doing some very prominent good deeds, and God knows what the spirit is, it's only the Almighty who knows what's going on in the heart. That should never be a, a reason for a person to be complacent and get involved in things which are clearly evil, uh, because this comforting feeling is there that since we have done certain good things, therefore the bad deeds are going to be taken care of. So it really is both ways. I was just mentioning that the Quran mentions both possibilities. Indeed, good deeds they do away with bad deeds, but the good deeds are good, prominent ones done with proper good intention. And the sins that are mentioned are minor sins. But the Quran also mentions the fact that some evil deeds are such
Mm.
that they destroy your good deeds because they, when you start committing them, your inner feelings are affected. Your good deeds become, uh, spiritless. They lose their true spirit and focus.
I've
So thank
always wondered about that. You know, I've thought a lot about that idea of good deeds replacing bad ones. Um, a few years ago, somebody contacted me and they said that they had they had gotten into a business transaction with somebody and they had lost a lot of money from them and they'd got sold. And I said, why did you trust this person? Like, how did you think? He said, well, I saw on Facebook that they had taken pictures Hajj and they went on Umrah twice a year and they took pictures. And I was like, and I was like, that just tells you they have enough money to go. Oh, it it and so I said, now they're going to take your money, right? And they're going to now go on, they're going to now go on Umrah, and they're going to take pictures so that they can take money from somebody else. But there is it makes sense that it's really referring to an actual correction, right? Obviously, when a person is praying in order to kind of undo the evil that they've done, right? That's not correction, right? Correction is really when you've actually corrected yourself, um, and you've corrected your character. That makes a lot of sense. Um, and we do depend on that mercy. At the end of the day, right at the end of the day, we all depend on the mercy of the Creator because we're not perfect.
And
We're
it's
not perfect, and He is.
Yeah, and it's so, so important to always remember how that he is most merciful and most forgiving and most compassionate. And I think of the things which I love how both of you last week, you as well, Rabbi Wiseman, and you this week, Dr. Zahir, how you've both encouraged for us to all have like an intimate relationship, but sort of with our creator, speak to him directly, like your best friend. Um, I think a big cause of a lot of the our actions that are harmful is because we lack that perception of that direct relationship. And I asked myself, well, why is that? And I think one, because sometimes someone might feel like they're not worthy of having that relationship with their creator, um, because they're so ashamed, or because in reality they don't believe they're worthy of forgiveness. So you know, they lose that connection because they don't feel that they are worthy. And secondly, sometimes in religion, you see people who try to put themselves between a person and their creator and say, I will guide you, I will help you connect to your creator, trust me, and I will do it. I would recommend that all religious leaders say to their followers, don't trust me, put your trust directly in your creator. You are worthy of having a relationship with your creator. I am a human being and I can guide you to the best of my ability, but only if I myself am guided, and only if I can get things wrong sometimes. You need to be seeking that truth directly from your creator, and I can make mistakes. Whereas he offers the best guidance. And if you can speak to him directly and remember that he does forgive all sins, if you just repent, whatever it is, he will forgive you. Um, and he loves you unconditionally. So, and he's just waiting for you to talk to him. I think if we all tried to talk to him. And for those who are not even sure that their creator exists, if you're not sure if God exists, if you're agnostic, or if you don't believe in him, then as you said, Dr. Zahir, why not just try? Maybe just speak and say, what have you got to lose? Dear creator, if you're there, if you're listening to me, help me, guide me, show me that you're here. And I believe that he will show you. And it says in the Quran that whichever way we look, there is his face. So I love how you said we should try and imagine as if we can see him, because I believe we can see him with our hearts, and we can, if we try and just look at every interaction we have with a human being, everything we look at in this world, is there is his face if we look at it with awe and seek guidance. And yeah, may he guide all of our hearts. And God bless you both for your effort and for your words of wisdom. And this makes me so happy that we can do this. So God bless you. And thank
To
you
all
all.
the folks out there, subscribe and like. See, I know how to do this thing. I watch a lot of videos. Subscribe and like. Subscribe and like.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, inshallah, see you next week. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, shalom, peace and blessings.